when it comes to after they're dead. I can't bring them anything. I can't give them anything, right? So how is it that I'm able to show them honor after they've passed on? What does this mean? What's the nature of showing them honor? What's the purpose? What am I doing when I show them honor after it's such a strange concept, right? Judaism is all about the idea that we don't have anything after death, right? And death is the end. That's the end of the relationship. So what's the nature of this that I'm showing honor after the person passes away?
Okay. We can't say something along the lines of Judaism always refers back to what we can learn from the past. So here too, even though the parent or Rebbe passed away, we show him honor by always referring back to him.
So I think there's a jump in the logic there, though. Right? We're assuming that this is honor. How are you? Right?
Just like Yetzias Mitzrayim happened thousands of years ago, I still refer to it today because I can learn something from it. Just because my father or parent or Rebbe passed away 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I can still refer to him, and by what he taught me, and by that way, I'm honoring his memory.
Right, but your analogy is Yetzias Mitzrayim, but I'm not honoring the Exodus from Mitzrayim. When I remember,
in a sense, by mentioning it, I am.
I'm honoring God. There's no concept of honoring an event. It. No, but there's no concept of honoring an event. I can't honor an event, right? I honor a person. I remember an event. So if the Gemara says that, if this Gemara would say you have to remember your parents during their life and during their death, and then the Tashbetz would say, and all the more so your Rebbe, so then I would understand your analogy. But it's like about honoring. I don't honor Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? So I remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. So here, what am I doing? Honoring is giving them something. The person's dead. They're not. I can't give them anything, right? That's a fundamental concept. I can't give them anything anymore, right? So that's a question. What are we accomplishing here, right? What's the idea? Okay, so let's go on to to the next thing. We have Aviv Imo. This is kriah on the Rava Mubak, that we have an obligation when our parents pass away. So we have an obligation to rip our shirt. Whenever one of the Shiva Krovim, it's called, one of the 7 close relatives passes away, so I have an obligation to rip my shirt for them. That's called kriah. So that's one of the, and there's a difference between kriah for parents and kriah for the other relatives, for sibling, for spouse, for children. So that's one way of doing kriah, and then for parents, there's another way of doing kriah. So the Gemara Moed Katan says, "Aviv v'imo v'rabo shlumdo Torah minolan." How do I know that I have to tear kriah for my father, my mother, and my Rebbe that taught me Torah? Dechsiv Elisha Rav who mitzaik avi rachav Yisrael farshav. Right. So it says when Eliyahu went up to Shemayim, right? Eliyahu dies, or he doesn't die, whatever it is. He transitions out of this world, whatever you understand that episode, right? It happened a couple of minutes away from my house, right? So he's standing in Yericho, and then all of a sudden, right, he goes up into Shemayim. Okay, so Elisha, his student, was standing there, right? And and he cries, right? My father, right? He's going on a chariot and he's leaving us. Avi, ze avi vimo, rachav Yisrael farshav, ze rabo shem do Torah. So we learn from this pasuk, we split it up. When he says, my father, so that teaches us that I have to tear kriah for my parents, right? So, and then when he says rachav Yisrael farshav, when it talks about the chariots of Yisrael, the Jewish chariots and their horsemen, right? Parashav are the horsemen, they're going up. So that teaches me I have to tear kriah on my Rebbe, right? So here we have the pasuk says, "Elisha Rav who mitzaik Avi Rachav Yisrael farshav lo ro'od," and didn't see him again. V'chazik b'begadov. Excuse me. He grabs his clothes, b'karim l'shnayim karim, and he rips it twice, two kriyas. Okay, so that's the pasuk. So the Gemara here says, the Gemara goes on. This is Gemara Moed Katan, and it says, Amar Bechia Amar. Al kol hamesim kulon When it comes to kriah, on all other of the relatives that we tear kriah, meaning everyone except for mother, father. So all those other ones, right? So you tear kriah on the inside, okay? So not like meaning on, like I'm now wearing a shirt and a jacket. So for your siblings, I would just tear kriah on my shirt. I don't have to tear kriah on the jacket, maybe fnim, like the inside garment, okay? So it says, but on father and mother, I also have to tear the both my jacket and my shirt. So Amar Rav Chisda v'chein nassi. Also, there used to be a position called nassi in Bnei Israel, right? So he was like the president of the Jewish people, right? So the nassi, who was also a scholar, so the whole nation would go into mourning, right? So for him, right? Meisvei lo ashuvu lavivimo ela lachui bilvad. So he says that no, hold on a second. The Gemara objects and says that we learned that the only thing we talk about where a father and mother are equal to the nassi is when we talk about fixing the garment, right? Back in the day, today you tear your shirt, right? So you throw your shirt out. It's not a big deal. The shirt isn't that expensive. Back in the day, you had like maybe one or two pieces of clothing. That's all you had. So when you tore your clothing for your parents, it was a big deal, right? Because that could have been your only garment that you owned. Right? And maybe you had 2, 3 garments, whatever it is, but that was a huge loss. That was a 30-year wardrobe. So you wanted to then afterwards, sew the rip up. So you're not allowed to do that for parents, right? That you can't do. And now we're saying that that's the only time that we make a connection between the nassi, who was so important that people would tear kriah over him, right? Everybody would have to tear kriah, and everybody would have to go into mourning over him. So they say that's the only time that's the only connection we have. It's not about the type of tear, it's about whether you can fix it. Only for parents and the nassi can you not fix it. My love afilu nassi, lo levar nassi, right? Except for the nassi. Everything else you can. And Rashi says, korei b'chutz, right? So right, so you rip on the outside, said, right? Rashi says, lo yishabu, rabu base v'nasi, v'chol hanach tatani v'mises lavi v'libo. So he says that Rashi connects this to one's Rebbe, okay? That when it comes to one's Rebbe. Okay, keep that in mind, because we're going to see that that's not so simple. These Gemaras are not so simple to understand. Let's look how the Rambam understands this, okay? The Rambam says as follows. This is the Rambam. This is source number 7 here. Ra Rabo over al divrei Torah. Okay, so let's say you see your Rebbe violates the Torah. Okay, he does something wrong, right? He's doing something wrong, and you see your Rebbe is doing something wrong. Omer lo datenu rabbeinu kach v'kach. So you don't say to him, hey, you're not allowed to do that, right? You have to say, so you have to give rebuke, right? You have a mitzvah to give rebuke, so you can't not say anything. That's not an option. You have a mitzvah, you have to say something. So how do you say something respectfully? You don't say, oh, you're not allowed to do that. You say that, Rebbe, haven't you taught us this and this, right? Haven't you taught us to do this and this? And now your actions are contradicting what you taught us. Okay. The cholzman shemaskir shmua b'fanav omer lo kach l'matenu rabbeinu. And whenever you quote something that you learned from your Rebbe in front of him, you say, this is what my Rebbe taught me. V'ayomar davar shlo shama mirabo ad shiskir shem amro. And don't. Now, the assumption was back in the day that everything you learned from your Rebbe. So if somebody would then give a Dvar Torah, or they would give a Dvar Halacha or say something, and they didn't quote who said it, your assumption would be that this person must be quoting that Rebbe that he always quotes. So if it's something that you haven't heard from your Rebbe, you better say who it is, so people don't make the mistake that they're quoting your Rebbe, which you're not at this point. Okay, Shiyamas Rabo. Okay, here's the part that's relevant to us. When your Rebbe dies, Korei kol begadav adshu megales libo. Okay, so when your Rebbe dies, you rip your clothes all the way until you reveal your heart, meaning you rip straight through. And then you can never repair that. The reason why this is important, okay, is because that halach of kriah to such an extent that you have to be megala libo, you have to reveal your heart, and that you can't ever fix the garment is only reserved for parents. So the Rambam says here that this goes so far as that you have to do this for your Rebbe. That's a very novel ruling. I mean, we just saw it in the Gemara, but that's the reason why the Rambam says it. Now, when does this apply? Does this mean that there's no qualifications to this? So he says no. It says barabam muvha shlomo mimenu rov chachmaso. Okay, now as always, as most people are accustomed, we have many different Rebbeim, right? I have my 9th grade Chumash teacher, and I have my Rebbe from my my Shana Aleph in Yeshiva, and I have my Rebbe that I learned all my Torah from. I have a different Rebbeim. So which Rebbe doesn't mean that every single time that somebody that once taught me Torah dies, then I have to tear kriah on them, right? So that's going to get pretty expensive, right? So it says no. So this is talking about what's called, and this is important for us to know this phrase, Rav Muvak. Okay, Rav Muvak means you have like one Rebbe, and how did we determine that he's your Rav Muvak? Shalom Avimenu Rav Chachmaso. Most of your Torah knowledge came from learning from that Rebbe, right? That's where that's most of your knowledge came from him. But if one of a rabbi that you know that you learned a lot from, but not the majority of your wisdom, this is what's called a Talmid Chaver. You don't have to do all this kovod for this person. This is only reserved for your Rebbe Muvak. But all these other Rebbeim, you have to stand up when they come into the room. And you do have to tear kriah on them, but not the kriah that you have for your parents. It's just a little kriah, and then you can fix it afterwards. Okay, I feel okay. Now, even if you only learn one thing from this person, right? So you have to stand up when they come into the room, and you have to tear in front of them. Okay, so that's the Rambam. Okay, so the Rambam goes on and he says, and that's in Hilchos Talmud Torah, if you notice. That's the Rambam talks about in the laws of Talmud Torah. Now, right, look at what the Rambam is talking about in Hilchos Avel. This is the laws of mourning. Okay, keep in mind, and this is important for us to know about the Rambam. We might have mentioned this, and I always repeat myself, so I apologize if I have. But it's very important to recognize that where the Rambam places the halacha is very important. Okay, it's not enough just to see what the Rambam says, but it's important to see where the Rambam is saying it. Okay, the Rambam is categorical. So if he puts a halacha in the laws of Talmud Torah, so that tells us that this is about the laws of teaching Torah, of learning Torah, and the laws of that's where he puts honoring a rabbi is in the 5th parak of Hilchos Talmud Torah. So that's what we know. When he puts a halacha in the laws of mourning, so then we know what the Rambam is telling us is that this halacha is really about mourning. Okay, so that's important to note. Okay, so now the Rambam talks about, and also one more thing, sorry, it's very rare for the Rambam to repeat himself. Right, the Rambam is writing a book that's going to encompass all of halacha. So the Rambam doesn't have to bring up every halacha over and over every time it's placed somewhere, right? He just has to mention it once. At best, right? At best, in customer service, the Rambam could say, refer back to Hilchos Talmud Torah, where I talk about other places you have to have mourning over your Rebbe. But he doesn't have to repeat all the halachos. But yet, look what he does here. He says, just like we tear kriah for our parents, so too you have to tear for your Rebbe that taught you Torah. Nassi and also on the nassi and on the av beistin. This is like the president again and the head of the beistin. You also have to tear. And if, God forbid, the majority of Bnei Israel are killed, right? So who could have imagined such a thing? Unfortunately, now we know, right? So then when you hear about this, so then you also have to tear. If you're a witness and you hear someone blaspheming God, you have to tear kriah at that point. Okay. But I'll say for Torah shenisraf, if you see, God forbid, a Torah burnt, right? Then you also have the same thing, tear kriah. Are Yehuda, are Yerushalayim, right? We learned about that on the cities of Yehuda and Yerushalayim and on the Mikdash. Okay, that's why this seems familiar, because we went through that year. Okay, so now the Rambam says as fast. He says, right? So where do we know that you have to tear on your Rebbe, just like you tear your shirt for your father? Right? We saw this by Elisha and Eliyahu. Right? So this is where we know, okay, it's a certain type of kriah that we have to have. Okay, so right, okay, so that's the round. You have to tear kriah. Okay, let's go on. Okay. So now, okay, this is the Rambam. One more thing. No, we just did this. Okay, I put it twice. Okay, this is halacha. This is the 10th source, the Beis Yosef. Okay, so the Beis Yosef is going to bring up the Ramban. And the Ramban is going to disagree with the Rambam. Okay. Okay, so the Ramban says, the Ramban b'Sefer Torah Sa'adam. The Ramban wrote a lot of different books. The Ramban was one of the more prolific authors in Jewish history. And not only was he very prolific in terms of how much he wrote, how many books he wrote, I should say, but he also was very wordy. We shown him, as you can see, they're very short in their words. The Ramban wrote like a lot. And he would go for pages he could write. So one of the books that the Ramban wrote is called Torah Adam, and it's the laws of mourning. Okay, so there's a separate work of the Ramban. This is not found in his commentary on the Gemara. It's not found in his commentary on Chumash. This is its own sefer Torah Adam. Hikshal Rambam. So he disagrees with the Rambam. Right, the Ramban was after the Rambam. So he quotes our Gemara. Right, so he quotes our Gemara and he says, the Gemara, if you remember in Moy Katan, had objected to the idea that the nassi is just like one's parents, right? In terms of what you have to tear. And the Gemara had said that nothing is like one's parents that you have to tear, right? There is nothing like that. So, and yet the Rambam here says that your Rebbe is like your parents, the same kriah that you do. So the Ramban says, I understand this is a Gemara. The Gemara came to the conclusion that you don't have to tear the same way. So if you don't have to tear the same way, so then why is the Rambam saying you do? Right? He's arguing on the Gemara. Right? And even when it comes to tearing on the outer garments, you don't have to. Right? So he says, right? So he says that this idea of tearing all the way down to your heart, revealing your heart, so that's something that's special, that's unique to parents, right? Right, and that's right. We see the Yerushalmi, we're going to see this later. That's something special to honoring parents. Okay, so now our question has to be here, right? What's the debate between the Rambam and the Ramban here? Okay, that's our question. I skipped one question. I just want to go back to this Gemara in Moed Katan, right? The Gemara had said it seemed to place father, mother, and Rebbe at the same level as it pertains to when we talk about kriah. But when it comes to tearing the garment on the outside, right? Fathers, mothers, and nassi are on one level, and Rebbe and everybody else on another level, which contradicts the first Gemara. Now, we have a contradiction in our Gemara. In one Gemara, it seems to say that Rebbe and parents are on the same level. Another Gemara says they're not. And that leads to this debate between the Ramban and the Rambam as to whether or not Rebbe and parents are on the same level or they are not on the same level. Okay? Everybody see? So we have three questions here that we're dealing with. One is the first question is, what is this idea of showing kovod after the Rebbe or the parents pass away? That's our first question, right? What's the nature of this kovod that we have? Because it's completely different than the kovod that when they're alive. And yet the Gemara seems to equate them. That's question number one. Question number two was the Gemaras seem to contradict themselves. One Gemara seems to put a Rebbe at the same level as one's parents. So all the halachos of kriah are the same. And the other Gemara says, no, it's not true. That's only referring to tearing on the outside, not referring to any of the other halachos. And then you have the debate between the Rambam and the Ramban, referring to those Gemaras about whether or not we tear kriah for the same way for a Rebbe and for parents. Those are our first three questions. Okay, let's go on to the next part of this year, which is this formulation that we say when a parent passes away. Okay, so when a parent or a Rebbe passes away. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says as follows: Kishemaskir Rabo toch Yud Beis Chodesh tzarich lomar Hareini Kaparat Mishkavo. Okay, so when a Rebbe passes away within the first 12 months, a person is obligated to say this phrase that I should be an atonement for in their passing, meaning we have a concept in Judaism that when somebody dies, so they go through some sort of pain, punishment, I don't know, whatever it is, for the first 12 months after they pass away, right? And that's supposed to be not such a pleasant experience. So we say for our parents and for our Rebbe, when we mention their names, right? So whenever you mention the name, there has to be this 3-word formulation afterwards. Harini kפרת משכבו. I should be an atonement for them. Now, give it to me. Let me take the pain. I'll take the pain for them. Whatever they're supposed to go through, the way that I can show. So what is this? What's the idea of saying this phrase? It's such a strange phrase to say. Harini kפרת משכבו. Okay, zecher tzadik levracha, I understand, right? That's a phrase that all of Hashalom. Okay, so the peace be upon them. That the names of the righteous should always be remembered for a blessing. Okay, that makes sense. But imagine if you would spell this out. Whatever pain they're supposed to go through right now for the next 12 months, I would like it to be on me. First of all, do you really want that? I don't know. I don't know what they're going through, but supposedly it's not that great. So now I'm telling to God, I'm saying, God, put that on me. I don't know. Let me see what I'm asking for first, right? I have no idea what I'm asking for. That's number one. So I don't know if this is something that I really want. I have no idea what I'm saying. Number two, what does that mean? It's like transferable. I can I can take the pain from Gehenna and bring it on me. How does that even? I don't know. So I don't. It's not the question of I don't know how it works, which I don't. But it's a question of what is the purpose of even saying such a thing? What's the idea here, right? That's the question. Okay. So okay, we saw before the Tashbates in the second source. The Tashbates had said that the Gemara that talks about that you have to show kovod to your parents after they die, so that also applies to your Rebbe. So this is the same. This is the same Tashbates, okay? And it's the Tashbate says like this. He says, "Odol shelas mipnei ma tiknu chachamim." This is a question that he was asked. This is the response of this. Mipnei ma tiknu chachamim l'misha maskir shem aviv o rabo tochu beis chodesh lomar hareini kaparas mishkavo. They're asking him, what's this idea that you have to say this line, Harini kפרת משכבו, that I should be an atonement in his passing? V'she'as harabo, af al pi shelo nizkar came the Gemara, l'fi shekach rayis b'kisvi, shekishani maskir mori, ani omer Harini kפרת משכבו. Not only that, the Gemara didn't say you should say it on your Rebbe. This was your idea, it says to the Tashbates, right? So the Gemara didn't say it, so why are we all of a sudden saying it? Right? The Gemara says only on parents, and now all of a sudden you're saying we should say it for a Rebbe. So he says tshuva, da ki Gemara b'kedushin, hiskiru chachamim zel aviv shezel b'chlal kibud aveim. Right? So the Gemara says it, and the Gemara says that this is part of kibud aveim. Okay? This v'amru mechavdo b'chayid mechavdo b'moso. Right? Like Gemara we saw that says that you honor your parents in their life and you honor them in their death. But moso keitzad, right? And the Gemara goes on, v'anan siti kavachomer. Right? Right? So he says, so all the more so by a Rebbe. Okay, but so he says, I opened up my svarim, the Tashbate says, and I see a lot of times people quote their Rebbe and they write this. They write Harini kפרת משכבו. I see it. Right? So he says, I see them doing this. Right? This is not something that I made up. I see it. Now, why do they do this? Right? So during the first 12 months, he goes through all sorts of pain. The son and the student, right, depending if we're talking about a parent or a Rebbe, is obligated to say that I want this tsar to come on me. But after 12 months, then he already had his judgment. Right after 12 months, supposedly, right, that's it. The judgment has been passed, and even the worst people, the greatest sinners, they only take 12 months. That's it. That's when they get their punishment, the first 12 months, not after that. Right? So after 12 months, saying that it's actually the opposite, right? If you say their atonement should be on me after 12 months, so that you're saying that they're so bad that their punishment goes on. So that's not kibud anymore, right? So this only lasts 12 months. What should you say? Now you can assume that they're in Olam Haba. So you say that they're right, that they should be remembered in Olam Haba, because you assume that even if they had punishment, so it's over at this point. Okay, Kidisa Hasam, O Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, Shenag Ksas Pnei Adam, Neshahu Lashon Mikra. Or the pasuk that says Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, that their name should be remembered as a righteous, their righteous name should be mentioned as a blessing. Shenag Ksas Pnei Adam, Neshahu Lashon Mikra, because that's found in the pasuk. Ella, sorry for the long source here. He says, Ella she'em askirin kaparas mishkavo Ella habanim atamidim kol yabeis chodesh. But the only people that mention this are our sons and the children and the students. But you don't mention this afterwards. Okay, so that's the background to where this comes from. But I'm still troubled as to how we could say such a thing, right? That's still very strange to me. Okay, good so far. Any questions?
Good? Just a side point. This 12-month period of Yisurim, when it comes to saying Kaddish for a parent, we say Kaddish for only 11 months because we don't want to say that the parent was a Russia and is going through 12 months of Yisurim. So we take the last month and we say, we don't say Kaddish during that last month. So I don't know if that would hold true for this phrase, but.
Right, so it seems like not. Right. It seems like not. It seems like we say this for the full 12 months, which would definitely contradict the minhag that you bring up. Okay. Okay, so this is interesting. The Piskei Tshuva says as follows. This is source number 14. The Piskei Tshuva says, Rabo, ayin b'tshuvos shar Ephraim, simin tzadik al, shekasav, misha gayer geyerim. Let's say somebody, what they do for a living, or their volunteerism, or I don't know, their role in the community, is they help converts convert, right? So a convert wants to come, this is the tutor, right? Every convert nowadays has a tutor. They have somebody that tutors you in what you need to know for converting to Judaism. So let's say you have somebody like that. And the phrase that we use is that we bring them under the wings of the Shechina, right? And then let's say this person dies. Right, this person died. I mean, this is what they've done. They've converted many people, and the person dies. Mechayiv in the crawl of Kedin Rabo, Ayin Shamot. So you have to tear kriah for this person. The converts have to tear kriah for this person that taught them all about Judaism. Right, makes sense. Right, because they brought them into to conversions. This is right, and this is last week's parsha. Ikach Avram Esari Yishto Ve'Slop Ben Achiv Ve'Skor Chushem Asher Achashu Ve'Sanefesh Asu B'Charon. Right, so we just read this, that Avram and Sarah came along and they took all the nefashos that asu b'charon, these the souls that they made in Charan. So what does that mean? So he brought them under the wings of the Shechina. Avram Megayeres Hanashim. Avram was the one that converted the men, and the Sarah Megayeres Hanashim, and Sarah would give classes to the women and teach them, and she would be the one to teach them. Okay, so and the Torah says it's as if they made them, right? They made their souls. Okay, good. So that's so this is, it's not just a Rebbe, but also a convert. Okay, so and this whole idea of a Rav and a Talmud is based in this famous Mishnah in Bava Metzia. There's a good Mishnah to know. So the Mishnah in Bava Metzia says as follows. It says, Avedaso Avedas Aviv. If you have your lost item and your father's lost item, right, you find them both. Okay, so you can take care of yours first. Avedas Rabo Shalo Kodemes, right? So if you find your lost item and your Rebbe's lost item, so you have to return his lost item first. Avedas Aviv Avedas Rabo. Now let's say you find the lost object of your father's and the lost object of your Rebbe's. So who do you go ahead and try to return first? Right, so Rabo Kodemes. So your Rebbe comes first. So why? Why does your Rebbe come first? Right, so it should be your father. You have a mitzvah kibbut aveim. So that's the idea. Rabo she'aviv heviu l'chayil hazeh. Right, a father brings you to this world. Right, Rabo shomdo chachma maybe l'chayil haba. Right, so a Rebbe teaches you wisdom, and he brings you to Olam Haba. So which is more important? Right, so the Rebbe is playing a bigger role than the father. right? So it says, right, and he says, V'im aviv chacham, right? So now, but let's say your father is a tav chacham, right? And he also taught you Torah, right? So shel aviv kodenes. So then the father's comes first because he's also a talmid chacham. So you fulfill both, right? The idea of honoring a chacham and the idea of honoring your parents. Okay, and the same thing is true if you run into your father and your Rebbe are taking their donkeys down the road, and they both have the donkeys are overburdened, and they both have to reshift the items on the donkey. So who goes first? Does the Rebbe's item go first, or the father's item go first? Same exact formulation, right? And this is like reminds us of the Ibn Ezra here, famous comment. Ve'elo todos Yitzchak ben Avram holid is Yitzchak, right? So everyone is curious in this pasuk why it mentions the fact that Yitzchak, it says, Eilo todos Yitzchak ben Avram holid is Yitzchak. It says these are the descendants of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. So why does it have to mention that? We already know that, right? Because it just said it, right? So it repeats it twice in the pasuk, the relationship. So the Ibn Ezra says, right? That what does it mean that he gave birth, that he birthed him? So it means that he brought him up and taught him, right? So that's the idea that there's almost this idea. A lot of people point to this for adoption, right? When it comes to adoption, that when you adopt somebody, you bring them up. It's as if you gave birth to them, right? That's the idea. Okay, so this is the idea. This is why you give a Rebbe kovod just like you give, or even more so than a parent. And this is what the Rambam says as well. He says the same thing here in this halacha. Okay, so not only that, but when it comes to Hilchos Talmud Torah, right, just like you're obligated to teach your son Torah, so too you're obligated to teach your grandson Torah. Right? Not only that, but, and here's the important part, mitzvah al kol chacham v'chacham Yisrael l'lamed es kol hatalmidim. Not only do you have to teach your children and your grandchildren, but you also have to teach your friends' children, right? If you're a chacham, so you can't just sit in your ivory tower, right? If you're a father, you have an obligation to teach your children Torah. If you're a grandfather, you have an obligation to teach your grandchildren Torah. If you're a chacham, right? That's even if you're an ignoramus. It doesn't make a difference. If you know nothing and you can't teach them anything, you have to hire somebody, right? Just like any other mitzvah. But if you're a chacham, so then at that point there's an obligation that comes to the chacham. He has to teach the children of the neighborhood. He has to teach everybody around him, right? He can't just sit there by himself and keep his chachma to himself. He has an obligation to teach, even though they're not their children. Right? So when it says children, right, that you should teach your children. Right, we see this in Shema, so we're dorish this. We explain this to mean that not only your children, right? Not only are we talking about your children, but your students are called your children, right? That's halacha. So there's this relationship between the Rav and the Talmud, right? So now what are we seeing in this relationship, right? So we see that the relationship extends past familial lines, right? At this point, the Rebbe Talmud relationship is referring to the right. This goes so far as to say that there's sort of like a Rebbe child. The Rebbe becomes almost like a parent to the student, right? Okay, right. This is this sifri that we see lebanecha, right? So that every time you see that a student is called a child, right? So right, so that's the idea. Okay, good. And by the way, that's the secret to when you have a good Rebbe. A good Rebbe doesn't look at his students as students. He looks at them as sort of like they're his own children, right? That's a key thing. Okay. The Ralbag, okay, so the Ralbag says as follows. Okay, so he says, Avi, this is on the pasuk of Elisha and Eliyahu. When Eliyahu goes up in the chariot and Elisha says, there goes our Rebbe. He's going up to Shemayim, right? We saw this pasuk. So he says like this. He says, Hine kamosha talmidim nikroim banim, right? Just as students are called children, kamo b'nei hanavim, v'chein harav yikra av. So too the Rebbe is called a father. Hihu hamolid shekol seichel hatalmid. Because what is the Rebbe giving birth to? The Rebbe is creating the seichel, the intelligence of the student. Right, that's what's happening here. Right, we have to to clarify something. We have a mistaken idea of what the purpose of a teacher is. Okay, so I think Ezra and Shlomi are the only ones on this call that might not have any idea what I'm talking about, because they're already in this next generation of students, and it's fascinating that all of education changed about 10, 15 years ago. But a teacher's job used to be to impart information. Now with the internet, information is available. No student needs help, right? If you remember our like report projects, you had to go to the library to do the project. You had to actually go to like find information. There was a building that had information in it. In your house, if your parents had bought an encyclopedia, so then you had some information in your house. But information was only to be had at the library. There was a central place. The town bought all the books, and they had all the books for you, right? This is like, and your teacher's job, right? If you think about our history teachers, right? What did our history teachers do? I had a history teacher that literally had a notebook full of notes, and he just copied his notes onto the blackboard. And then we copied the notes that he put onto the blackboard, we copied into our own notebooks. Right? It was the dumbest, if you think about how ridiculously backwards that is today, right? Like that he could have just simply photocopied his notebook and handed it to us, right? He wasn't doing anything. There was nothing he was teaching. He was just imparting it. It infuriates me now when I think about how dumb these classes were, right? Today, I can ask my students, what happened in 1776? And all they have to do is type into Google, what happened in 1776? And they'll have all the information. They'll have more than I know off the top of my head, right? More than I could teach. So that's not but in Torah, a Rebbe's job was never just to impart information. It was to impart a methodology. It was to impart how to process that information. We never learned how to process information. Nobody ever taught us how to, but in Torah, that's all we were being taught. We were being taught, right, here's some information, but here's information. Here's the methodology of learning. That's the most important thing. That's what this Rambam is talking about. He says, "Hu molid seichel hatalmid." It's a beautiful line. He births the intelligence of this student, right? Because that intelligence doesn't exist, right? You don't have that naturally. You don't know how to process and how to put information into context. So that's what the Rebbe is doing. V'kara rechav Yisrael farshav kilu yomar shehu hatokef ha'chozek shel Yisrael. Okay, and there's also a military aspect to Eliyahu's leadership. That's not so important to us. Okay, so right, so that's an important thing, right? Okay, okay, good. So that's what we have so far. So maybe we'll end a little early here. We'll just review our questions of what we have here before we go. We had 4 essential questions. Okay, so that we're dealing with here in the first part. The first question is, what is the idea behind giving kovod, giving honor and respect after the death of one's Rebbe and one's parent? Right, that's our first question. Okay, our second question was the contradiction in the Gemara that we had between the Gemaras that seem to equate the kriah and some of the laws of mourning that we have between parents and a Rebbe, and then you have the second Gemara which says that they're not equated, right? So that's our second question. How do we understand the contradiction between those 2 Gemaras? Then we have the third question is Machlokas Ramban and Rambam, which seems to follow along the lines of each one taking the Gemara that they like and saying, right, so how do we understand that debate on a conceptual level, right? It's very easy to say, okay, the Rambam felt more like this Gemara and the Ramban felt more like that. Okay, so that doesn't, right, that's, but on a conceptual level, how do we understand it? Now, our fourth question is, what's this idea that we say, Harini Kapara Mishkavo, after mentioning our parents and our Rebbe in the first 12 months of their death? What's the idea of saying this line? What is this line, right? What is it? Not just how it works, but what exactly is this line all about? Good? Okay, so what I'll try to do this week is maybe just we'll list the questions so you see them so that you can review if you want. And then we'll do next week, we'll try to finish the sources and the questions, and then hopefully, I don't know, it's a lot, but maybe we'll even start on the answers. Okay, we'll start on the svar on the answers. Good. Okay, so that's the end of this week's shir. Thank you very much for joining, and I very much appreciate it. This is the highlight of my week, so you've made me happy by being here. So I appreciate it. Really, I'm not exaggerating. This is literally the highlight of my week. This is the best thing that's going to happen in my week. So thank you very much. I appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you, Rob. We'll see you next week.